Hey guys, we're back. As promised, we are going to look at the verdict for the Tyre Nichols case, where the officers are being sentenced for the unaliving of Tyre Nichols. All right, let's go ahead and share so we can get through this. I've been trying to keep up with this and watching to see when they were going to come, and they are finally here. Everything said in this video is alleged, in my opinion, and is used for fair use and entertainment. Let's get this verdict, honey. Let's get this verdict. Let's make it big. Okay. All right. We're sharing. All right. They've already started live, so I just kind of made it. I just kind of took it back a little bit. All right. I'm going to be getting started here in a second. All right. Let me take my trigger warning banner down. We don't really need that. Thank y'all for being here. So this is Tyre. This is the Tyre Nichols unaliving trial, where the officers will be getting their verdicts passed down to them. Okay. As you guys may know, the jurors they were set to return after they had the deliberations in the trial of the three ex-MPD, which is the Memphis Police Department officers who were charged in Tyre Nichols unaliving. Okay, they've been deliberating since I think yesterday. The trial has been going on, I think, for 8 days. So now the jurors have come to a resolution, and they're getting ready to announce that. So justice for Tyre Nichols. Thanks everyone for joining. Please don't forget to hit the like for me if you can. Okay, just because they started a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and push it forward just a bit.
Second-degree murder.
Back it up.
We, the jury.
Y'all be patient with me.
00241, State of Tennessee versus Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. The council would like to stand with their clients. The verdicts read as follows. Count 1, second-degree murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Justice Smith, not guilty.
What?
Count 2. Aggravated assault, acting in concert. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count 3. Aggravated kidnapping with bodily injury. We, the jury, find the defendant, Darius Bean, not guilty. Count three, we the jury find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count three, we the jury find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty.
This ain't
Count
good.
four, aggravated kidnapping with a deadly weapon. We the jury find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Count four, we the jury find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count four, we the jury find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count five, official misconduct, unauthorized exercise of official authority. We the jury find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Count five, we the jury find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count five, we the jury find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count six, official misconduct, refraining from performing a duty. We the jury find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. We the jury find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. We the jury find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. Count seven, official oppression. We the jury find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Count seven, we the jury find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count seven, we the jury find the defendant, Justin Smith, not guilty. All verdict forms have been signed by the foreperson. Attorneys, you can have a seat with your clients. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have performed your duty. We appreciate the time and attention that you all have given to this case. We will now excuse you all from court.
It will do this. They will absolutely do this again. I'm mad, y'all. I'm sorry.
All right, you can be seated. Mr. Bean, Mr. Haley, and Mr. Smith, the jury of your peers have found you not guilty on all charges with these matters. The court will enter the judgment sheets accordingly, and this will conclude your matter that's before the court. Good luck. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead and adjourn.
All rise. Court is adjourned at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Memphis about to go crazy. I just know it. I just know it. This is insane. They know they hurt. They know they stomped, kicked, and punched and everything else that man. They know they did, and they standing here hugging like they. This shit is pissing me off. I'm sorry, y'all. What they crying for? What? Because they got off? Is that what he crying for? I cannot imagine what Tyre Nichols' family is going through watching this and hearing these verdicts being passed down. This is so crazy. As a mother of a black son, this irritates me. This infuriates me. This makes me mad to know that the justice system has failed this man's family. The justice system failed this man's family. It's literally a video of these officers kicking, hitting.
But again, now we know the fate more than 2 years after the beating death of Tyre Nichols.
Happening after 22 witnesses.
Kayla, of course, this is by far not the end of the road for these three officers, plus the other two who were accused in this, Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills. They're all waiting a sentencing from the federal trial that happened last year.
Yeah, now we do know each of them were found guilty of at least one charge at the federal level, and we know that the sentencing will happen for that. They were waiting to see what the outcome of this trial would be before that sentencing would happen. And of course, the one that is up in the air still at the state level is Emmett Martin. Now, he is the one, his name came up multiple times in this trial. He testified in the federal trial, took a deal at the federal level, but at this point, it's not clear what his state plea may look like. We know that he was offered one, but he has not officially accepted one at this time. So it still looks like he will have a separate trial at this point.
Clearly, Kayla, everyone is extremely emotional about what has just happened. Again, all three officers are acquitted of all of their charges. We also know that Tyre Nichols' family has been in this courtroom from the very beginning as well. Can you tell us about their thoughts, feelings, emotions as they exited the courtroom today?
Yeah, of course, heading into today, we were told that they were happy with the job that the state did, that the prosecutors did in this case. Now, we just heard from prosecutor Paul Hagerman that they are planning to speak to us momentarily. So, of course, we'll have that in a second for you. But we heard from the family. They said they were happy with how the state presented themselves. We know Rovon Wells herself was one of the witnesses called up by the state, the very first witness that they called up to the stand. But as soon as the verdict was read, we did see his sister got up as she was trying to leave the courtroom, immediately just overcome with emotions. Now, of course, they couldn't show that emotion within the courtroom or while the verdict was being read because there were very strict instructions handed down by Judge Jones. But we know at this point that they are overwhelmed with emotion, just waiting to hear from them at this point.
I have to say, I think a lot of people, Kayla, may be a little taken aback. There was an overriding sentiment that while all the charges wouldn't stick, I think that everyone understood that not all 7 would stick against all 3 defendants. There was an overriding sentiment that someone was going to be found guilty in some phase of this entire proceeding, but that is not the case. Your thoughts? Again, you've sat through the entire federal trial late last year. You've been through every moment of this, and you've covered this case every step of the way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, at the federal level, we saw of the 3 defendants that Demetrius Haley received the harshest penalty. He was found guilty of excessive force causing bodily injury at the federal level, and he's been in custody ever since then. We're expecting something similar because there was clear video that showed out of the 3, he was the only one that administered a kick to Tyre Nichols's body. Now, of course, we know that that is not the case, and he has still remained in federal custody since then. But again, he, along with his 2 other co-defendants, all found not guilty of all charges. So at this point, it'll be interesting to see if the state will try this once again. Will we have another trial coming up? Of course, we'll hear from them momentarily.
Okay, it also seems like in this case, defense attorneys really focused on the use of force with these 3 officers, and they really compared it to what happened with Emmett Mills and, of course, Desmond Martin as well. In this case, it seems like, it's very clear, in fact, that the defense attorneys were really able to prove to this jury that their clients, their defendants, whatever force was used, it was not considered to be excessive in this case.
Yeah, they stressed that the Scorpion team goes in, or used to, at the point when it was a unit that existed. They used to go into the most dangerous neighborhoods and deal with the most dangerous suspects. And in this case, they really painted a picture for the jury that Hickory Hill, where this all happened, that neighborhood is one of those dangerous neighborhoods. Now, of course, the big question is, why was Nichols pulled over in the first place? Why were the blue lights turned on? Now, we heard in the federal case that Emmett Martin was the one who really got this all started. He was the one that he told the team that he saw Nichols driving erratically. He was switching lanes, he was speeding, but he even admitted on the stand at the federal level that that was not true and that he was just angry and he was looking for someone to pull over. So it looks like the defense was effective in using their experts to show that being a police officer is based a lot on impulse and also the environment that you're in. A lot of the decisions that you have to make are on the spot. And they did a good job of also bringing in witnesses to their point that were owners of the credit cards that they say were stolen and found in Nichols's car after the fact.
That is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She's live just outside the courtroom down at 201 Poplar. Kayla, we're going to let you go. I know Paul Hagerman, the assistant DA who tried this case on behalf of the state, is going to be addressing the media shortly. We'll be cutting in or staying here, and we'll be hearing from him shortly.
We also have a second reporter that's down at the courthouse today. That is Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu. You are just stepped out of the courtroom. I know that you've had an opportunity to talk to a few people about their reaction to this case. What have they had to say?
Well, guys, I'll tell you what, just a few minutes before that verdict came down, we saw this presence kind of show up. Take a look back there, Derek. You can see quite a few deputies sort of came out of the woodworks here. I know you all have seen some of the folks who were standing over behind Kayla's live shot there. There are also some here at the end of the hallway. Around the time that verdict came out, you know, a lot of the folks left. We saw Tyre Nichols' family towards the front of that crowd. They did not look up. They did not say a word. His mother, Rovon Wells, was very sullen. They were flanked by many of the activists who have been so close with that family all along. A lot of them were visibly shaken, visibly crying. They took them into this room back here. We're told that's where prosecutors are actually meeting with the family. They're going to talk this over and then apparently come out and make some kind of statement. Now, behind us here are the elevators. A lot of the defendants' families came out shortly after Tyre Nichols' family. They turned up this hallway, and as they entered that far elevator down the hallway there was a young woman, a relative of one of those former Memphis police officers, who continuously shouted, "Hallelujah, praise Jesus, hallelujah." That went on for probably a minute and a half or so. These elevators don't move very quickly, so they made it in there. She continued yelling. A lot of emotions here. Still no word from the family of Tyre Nichols or those prosecutors, that we are waiting on that input. Daryl and Darcy.
That is Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu reporting live downtown at the courthouse today. Again, just a recap to start over again. All three former Memphis police officers. We're talking about Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. All three were found not guilty on all charges. The major charges, the most severe charges of second-degree murder, and even the lesser charges of official misconduct and, of course, official oppression. All three found not guilty.
As you flip the page there, Justin Smith, again, on all 7 counts, not guilty. Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Demetrius Haley. Across the board, the verdict is acquittal for all three on all 7 charges. Again, there were several, a couple of dozen lesser charges that all fell under those major charge categories that are basically just wiped off the books after the primary verdict here of not guilty on all 7 counts. 21 counts in total against 3 defendants. Of course, the jury made up of 8 white women, 4 white men, all from Hamilton County, Chattanooga specifically. There were 2 alternates too, a man and a woman, who were dismissed right before deliberations began.
You know, the defense attorneys in this case, they continue to say that this was simple police work. It was nothing that was out of the ordinary. It was nothing that was considered to be excessive. We have all seen the video time and time again, but they again framed it with these 3 officers. What they were doing, they considered it to be simple police work.
Acting within the scope of their duties and responsibilities, given the circumstances that were in front of them. That's
they follow procedure.
That's the way one of the defense attorneys proposed it early on in opening statements. All right, let's go back to Fox 13 investigative reporter Kayla Solomon again outside the courtroom there. Kayla?
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about that jury makeup. That was one of the first things that we observed on day one when they brought in this jury last Monday. You could see that there were 16 total, but only one person was potentially not white. And of course, she was one of the people that did not make it through to this next process. We were told that one juror got sick and another one just simply went home. So yesterday, when it came time just before deliberation, there were 14 jurors and they randomly chose 2 to be the alternates. So ultimately, it came down to 12 that had to make that final decision. And as you mentioned, it was 8 women and 4 men, all of them white, all of them from Chattanooga. And it seems like what they were told by the defense witnesses as well as the defense attorneys, that's what really rang true for them when it came to deciding on this verdict. And they told the judge from the beginning, this was a unanimous verdict. And of course, they also had lesser charges to consider, but to them, it was not guilty across the board.
And Kayla, one of the things that we have to go back to on literally day one, both the defense and the prosecution seem very happy with their respective or their processes. They were happy with jury selection because jury selection, a lot of times in these instances with trials of this magnitude and the charges of this kind of gravity, that jury selection can take days, sometimes longer than the trial. But in this case, both seem happy with the makeup.
Yeah, exactly. And it still did take days. It just so happened that it was in Chattanooga. We weren't there for that entire jury selection process. So we were ready to go by day one on April 28th. And for some people, that seems to be a benefit because you're starting from day one instead of having to go through that unpredictable process of jury selection. And you never know how long that can take. And in this case, yes, they were able to start from day one on April 28th. And of course, they went all up until yesterday when deliberations began. And they deliberated from about 12:30 to 5 yesterday. And today they started again at 9:30 and they were done by just before 2 p.m. this afternoon. So total was about 8 hours or so.
Kayla, this has to be a relief clearly for these 3 officers. They weren't sure really what was going to happen in court today. Again, these state charges, they have walked away. They have been acquitted of all of the state charges, but they still have federal charges to deal with.
Yeah, each of them were found guilty of at least one federal charge at this point, and it's obstruction of justice for what happened afterwards, the conspiracy that people say they committed and that the jury found them guilty of committing right after the beating happened and then the days following. Now, we don't know when the sentencing for that will be, but we do know that a lot of the timing of this all has hinged on what happened here today and what the verdict for this trial would be. Now, of course, the family had said from the beginning they were hoping to get a conviction. They really wanted that second-degree murder charge because that's what they felt this was. And of course, it was video that many of us have seen plenty of times and people have formed their own opinions. But again, they were hoping, what would happen here in the state trial would hinge a lot on what would happen when it came to the federal sentencing.
Okay, and that is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon reporting. This has been a long time coming.
Yes, it has.
This all started in early January of 2023.
It did. As a matter of fact, let's take you back to that night. This is video you've undoubtedly seen so many times. This is after the traffic stop. This is after Tyre Nichols had run from the initial traffic stop, trying to, according to his parents, make it back to his home. This only happened a couple of blocks from his home there in Hickory Hill, January of 2023. And you can see the 3 officers charged, plus 2 others surrounding him there as he's on the ground. This is, as I said, it's been played over and over again in the media. They saw it dozens and dozens and dozens of times this past week in court.
But something that we as viewers did not see, that jurors were able to see, and attorneys were able to see. We've seen the video just kind of playing itself out. Mm-hmm. In court, these jurors were able to see it literally frame by frame. They slowed it down so they were able to see the involvement and impact of each officer involved in this case with Tyre Nichols. They were able to see exactly where each officer was positioned, each officer, how close they got to Nichols' body, mm-hmm. every strike, every kick, every punch, every hit with the baton. They were able to determine who was involved, which officer was involved.
Now, this particular piece of video that we have on a loop right here, this is not the actual attack. The beating is, quite frankly, it's still a little hard for a lot of people to watch. So we've distilled that down. That was the aftermath and the officers standing and I want to say evaluating the situation there. That was Skycop video from that night. And as you said, Darcy, it was John Keith Perry, a defense attorney for Tadarius Bean, who said over and over again, my client, speaking of Tadarius Bean, never struck him in the head, never struck him, never kicked him. I mean, he went through, as you said, frame by frame. And the video that the jury saw also had each officer labeled. It was very different from our view. It was the same view, but, you know, there were a lot of analytical features in the video that were able to let the jury understand what was right in front of them. And that's what they saw. And you have to say that Perry, Stingle, and Zimmerman, the three the three defense attorneys did an outstanding job in planting that seed of doubt in this jury of 12.
And clearly in this case, it worked. Again, all 5 officers are already awaiting sentencing in the federal trial from last year. And as Fox 13 has told you, this is trial number 2 out of 3.
Now, the family of Tyre Nichols is suing the city for $550 million. Now, in that case, attorneys for the city are working right now to turn over hundreds of thousands of pieces of video and other documents to the Nichols family. All of those documents not related just to Tyre Nichols, but related to that pattern and practice lawsuit that's been filed against the city.
We're going to go back to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She's back in the courtroom right now, or outside the courtroom, in fact. Kayla.
Yeah, you said it all there, that there was a seed of doubt that was planted by defense attorneys. I know a few months ago when we saw them in the federal trial, it seemed like some of the witnesses were all over the place. As I was sitting there watching it, it was sometimes hard to follow what they were saying, the points they were making. Some of the questions they were asking the witnesses were confusing. And you can tell that they spent these last few months prepping their witnesses. Some of them that they brought back were in the federal trial, but they also brought forth new witnesses. One interesting tidbit of information is that they called Preston Hemphill, one of the former Scorpion Unit team members who was there at the initial traffic stop. The defense called them as their witness. He did not testify on behalf of the state. They also called in the EMT Robert Long, who was on the scene treating Nichols the night that he was beaten. Now, we know at this point that the DA's office is planning to come out in about less than a minute. We just saw Hagerman come out. He walked out, and he at first said that he wanted to speak to the family before addressing us, which is, you know, customary at this point. But right now we're waiting to see what he has to say. So I'm going to toss it back to you so that we can get into place and bring that to you live once Hagerman is ready to speak with us.
Okay.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you so much, Kayla. We're also waiting on our Fox 13 legal expert, Andre Wharton, will be here with us to really kind of go step by step on the charges that the officers were facing and the not guilty verdict for all 3 officers involved in this case. Something that was interesting that the defense attorneys continue to bring up was something called use of force continuum. It is a guideline for officers when it comes to use of force, depending on the severity of the subject's behavior, but also the level of resistance. They continue to focus on that with these 3 officers talking about the kind of force that was used against Tyre Nichols. It was not the same as Emmett Martin and the other officer, Desmond Mills.
That's right.
It's not the same.
They also brought in use of force experts to outline exactly how these officers were trained in accordance with MPD guidelines. And time again, when the defense, those experts made it clear that this is how these men were trained at the time, and that their response to Tyre Nichols was commensurate to his amount of resistance. Again, we refer back to the video that we have seen ad nauseum for the better part of 2 years. That video to the layman looks very, very different. And it's hard, I would imagine, for so many people to understand right now this verdict of not guilty on 7 counts against each officer receiving full acquittal on all 7 counts against them. And I think you're going to hear some of that. You will hear some of that outrage, I believe, when we speak to the Tyre Nichols family. But also understand that the Nichols family is probably exhausted at this point.
I'm sure they have to be. I actually met Rovon Wells just a few months ago, and she said it was exhausting at that point. She said she was tired. She said she wanted some justice for her son, but she also said she just wanted it to be over and for it to not happen again. But here we are now, over 2 years later. They've gone through the federal trial. We have gone through the state trial. Again, all three officers have been acquitted on all counts. We're talking about the 7 major counts, but even all of the lesser counts as well. They have been all acquitted of these charges. Now, mind you, there is still the civil trial that is left, and that is against the city of Memphis.
All right, let's go back to the courthouse. Paul Hagerman, Associate DA, about to address the media.
Sure. Thank you. I want the trial team to flank me. So we are obviously disappointed by today's verdict. We respect the jury's decision, but we obviously strongly disagree with it. We, in good faith, brought this case, and I am convinced to this day that we had compelling evidence that showed that there was proof for every element of every one of the offenses that we charged. The jury took a different view. That is, of course, their right. That's the part of the decision. I want to start out by commending the trial team, Mr. Hagerman, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Headley, who did an excellent job. I wouldn't have done anything different. I thought they brought a compelling case to bear. I also want to commend the family of Tyre Nichols, who showed extraordinary grace and resilience through an incredible ordeal, an unimaginable ordeal. It's hard for me to understand, as I'm sure it's hard for the public to understand, or many in the public anyway, who watched that video, who heard the testimony, who heard the compelling arguments of trial counsel. It's hard for us to imagine how someone could say that none of the defendants were guilty of any of the charges. I personally think any fair-minded person who watches the video would come to the conclusion that everybody there had some responsibility for Tyre Nichols' death. But as I said, the jury took a different view. What I do know is this: Tyre Nichols is dead and deserves to be alive. And that is a tragedy. It's my hope that the public understands that this is part of the system and that our office will continue to push for accountability for everybody who violates the law, including, if not especially, those who are sworn to uphold it.
What do you think what just didn't connect? What do you think it was? Was it the training? Was it the character witnesses? What do you think it was?
It's so hard to figure that out. It could be any number of a million things. And I am disinclined to try to say, oh, we should have done this differently or we should have done that differently, because I think the trial team did an excellent job. Obviously you had a situation where, arguably 2 of the more culpable defendants were not present. Then that allowed the remaining defendants to point the finger at others. I personally think that when you take a look at all of the evidence, that shouldn't matter. Perhaps the jury took a different view. It's just impossible to say.
I know it's very early, but is this a case that you all are looking to retry?
I think it is too early for us to say that. I don't know what the grounds would be for that. We do have to accept the finality of a jury verdict in most cases.
Any thoughts about the jury being from Chattanooga and an all-white jury?
Obviously, people have mentioned that as an issue. I'm not going to speculate about that. I think it's a testimony to the fairness of our criminal justice system that we bent over backwards to get a jury from another jurisdiction to assure that the defendants were given a fair trial. Beyond that, I don't think I should comment.
The defense did worked on pointing at Emmett Martin as the most violent of everyone there. It seems that the man had landed with the jury. You're securing a guilty plea for Emmett Martin. Can you talk a little more about his involvement?
Well, obviously, I think the proof speaks for itself, and Mr. Martin was, extremely involved and culpable, and played a key role in the unjustified death of Tyre Nichols. What's going to happen over at the federal court and what will happen with his case remains to be seen.
What kind of conversation did you have with Tyre Nichols' family when they left today?
We spoke to them briefly. Obviously, they were devastated. I think you could imagine that they would be devastated. I think they were outraged, and I think we can understand why they'd be outraged by this result, given the evidence. They quite understandably decided that they needed to go home and process all this, and we're going to give them that respect and respect their privacy.
What sort of message does this give to specifically the Memphis Police Department, who just got done with this pattern and practice investigation and really doesn't have to grapple with the consequences of that either?
Right. So it's important to note that, you know, there have been guilty verdicts over on the federal side. I'm not going to speculate about what will happen over on the federal side, but it's not like there have been no consequences whatsoever from the tragic killing of Tyre Nichols. I personally think that if we're going to make any sense of this tragedy, if we're going to have any silver lining from this dark cloud of both the event itself and, in my view, today's verdict, it has to be that we need to reaffirm our commitment to police reform and to doing what we need to do to make sure that tragedies like this don't happen again. And I remain committed to that. I'm sure the city of Memphis remains committed to that, and we're not giving up on that.
Are you surprised that they didn't? Because they could have gone for lesser charges than second-degree murder. What, 9 different charges they could have gotten, and they didn't even have to go to those. Did that surprise you?
Was I surprised that there wasn't a single guilty verdict on any of the counts or any of the lesser included offenses, given the overwhelming evidence that I think that we presented? Yes, I was surprised. Do I have an explanation for it? No.
How much did the state rely on the videos from that night, the Sky Cop video, the body cam videos? How much did you all rely on that as far as this trial goes?
Well, I mean, you saw the evidence. You saw the trial as well as I. I think it speaks for itself. Certainly the videos were a big part of the state's case, as they understandably would be. But I don't think the trial team relied entirely on the videos. I think they brought to bear witness testimony, very effective cross-examination of the defense witnesses, and some compelling opening and closing arguments. And I think when you add it all together, I think the state did a hell of a job. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking about any of the decisions the trial team made. I think they did an excellent job. They're a credit to our office. You know, anybody who does any kind of jury trial work knows that you just can't predict what a jury will do. Them's the breaks, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, particularly in a case like this. But like I said, we can strongly disagree with the jury's verdict, but we nonetheless respect the jury.
Do you have any messages for people in the community who have had direct confrontations with not only the Scorpion team, but other police officers? There are federal lawsuits that are currently underway of people who have accused the Memphis Police Department of brutality. Do you have any message to them?
I guess my message to the community would be twofold. A, even if you were out there outraged by this verdict, you know, please respond in a lawful, peaceful manner. Second, as I said earlier, with respect to any charge of violation of the law, including by those who are sworn to uphold it, we'll enforce the law. And just as we did aggressively in this case, we'll do that in any other case in which the facts and the law suggest that anybody in the law enforcement community or anybody else has violated the law and used excessive force.
Does Mr. Hackerman or Headley or Johnson have any comment
Yeah,
about
please.
y'all tried the case?
We tried real hard. We fought real hard in there. We knew this was always going to be difficult. As DA Mulroy said, we're trying the 3 least culpable in terms of, obviously, Mr. Martin was the primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. Mr. Mills, with the baton strikes, again, a primary actor, and he's entered a guilty plea. So we knew this trial would be hard. I think y'all saw us fight in there. We did the best we could, and the family, they've been great through this. Today's heartbreaking to them, but they've been with us fighting.
What is it like for you all to go through all of this and looking at the video and talking with the family and definitely expecting something else?
You know, it's disappointing. It's heartbreaking. You try cases. It's a business of trying cases, though. Okay. There's always risk and there's reward, but we keep on going. We try to get justice. And I think we tried hard in there this week to get justice. I know the family was behind us, and we didn't get the result we wanted or they wanted, but they've thought about Tyre obviously a lot this week, and they're thinking about Tyre now. And
Melanie, Tanisha, anything?
Was there any bit of evidence
Excuse me.
that was presented over the last week and a half, or any argument made by the defense that felt particularly salient to you guys that you kind of were like, this kind of sucks to deal with and try and like move around?
I don't think we can at this point sort of, like I said, Monday morning quarterback or think retroactively about this or that. This blow was particularly powerful. That one was particularly powerful. I think structurally, as Mr. Hagman's already mentioned, the two defendants who were most culpable weren't present in the courtroom, right? That doesn't mean that the remaining three defendants weren't culpable. You heard our arguments in there about criminal responsibility, people being responsible for the acts of another, the duty to intervene, the duty to take affirmative steps at what was clearly, a person being beaten to death.
Mhm.
That was a structural part of the trial that was a challenge for the trial team. Other than that, I think it's hard to identify any one thing. It's hard to get inside the mind of the jury.
Will this verdict, is this going to affect Emmett Martin's plea deal at all, or any sentence he may receive when he does plead guilty?
That's up to the federal court. We really can't speculate on
What
that.
about on the state level?
Well, I think we're not really prepared to talk about that just yet, because what we're doing is we're waiting to see what happens over with the federal sentencing. And once we see what happens with the federal sentencing, we'll have a better idea of what we want to do with that case.
And my last question about the jury, because obviously the jury made the decision, but those who don't understand the process, I know you all want an unbiased jury, but why Chattanooga? Where did that come from as far as that jurisdiction?
Go ahead.
There was a motion filed to defense to change venue, and there was a study done of the amount of publicity in the various large cities in Tennessee, and it was found that Chattanooga had the lowest amount of pretrial publicity with regard to this case, and so that's why it was chosen.
All right. Thank you all very much.
That is Fox 13's that is District Attorney Steve Mulray right there. You were hearing also Assistant DA Paul Hagerman speaking in reference to how they perceive the outcome of this trial, of the verdict. Again, all three former officers, Darius being Demetrius Haley, and of course Justin Smith, they were all acquitted on all of the charges.
On all 7 counts.
All of them, even the lesser charges.
Total of 21 filed against 3 men in this case. And I think it's an important perspective to keep in mind. You heard Paul Hagerman say it. You heard Steve Mulroy say it a few times throughout their brief remarks there. Keep in mind, these were 3 of the 5 officers charged, and it was Paul Hagerman who called them the 3 least culpable of the 5. Keep in mind, Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills have already taken plea deals with the state. They've already been found guilty at the federal level, as have other officers in this particular case. So I think it is very important to keep it in perspective that there will be punishment for the death of Tyre Nichols. No one is walking scot-free in this particular instance. And I think the most poignant thing that Steve Mulroy said were very close to the top of his remarks when he said it's hard to understand how someone could say that they were not guilty of those charges after looking at that video. It's very hard for him to understand. And I think that's probably a sentiment that's shared throughout the Memphis community tonight, to all of those who watched this case.
I think also because when we saw the video, the immediate conclusion was that every person that was there, you held some sort of responsibility for the fact that this young man lost his life. But again, in this case, these 3 officers, this jury out of Hamilton County, their actions, their behavior that night, this jury felt that it was exactly police posse. It was nothing out of the ordinary. It was not to be considered excessive. It was under protocol. Even though for the rest of us that saw the video, again, we may have seen things a little bit differently. But as I said earlier, the video was slowed down second by second for these jurors. So they saw every strike, every move, every hit, every punch, every kick. They saw it all in that format. We didn't see it that way. But to the naked eye, it felt like this verdict was going to be a little bit different, but it
did.
wasn't today.
And of the 7 counts, I think that I'm most surprised that charges 6 and 7 didn't stick on someone.
Something.
Because charge 6, official misconduct, refraining from performing duty, that means basically I did nothing to help. You know, you have a duty as an officer to help someone in need, and also official oppression. It's hard to watch the video and watch them even in the aftermath of the beating. The video we've seen time and time again just over the past few minutes of those officers circling a Tyre Nichols who's laying on the ground helpless. It's hard to see that video and not see that as oppressive, but in the eyes of the law, in this particular case, according to the jury, not guilty on all 7 counts. And we should say we did get a statement from the attorneys Ben Crump and Antonio Ramanucci. They reacted to the verdict. There it is right there, but we're going to read part of it. It says, today's verdicts are a devastating miscarriage of justice. The world watches Tyre Nichols was beaten to death by those sworn to protect and serve. That brutal, inhumane assault was captured on video, yet the officers responsible were acquitted.
Tyre's life was stolen and his family was denied the justice they so deeply deserve. We were outraged, and we know we are not alone. We thank the Memphis community, people across the nation who have stood by Tyre's family, lifted their voices, and demanded accountability.
And we're going to have this entire statement posted on our website. It wraps up and in summary says, let this be a rallying cry. We must comfort the broken systems in this particular case.
We're going to go back to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon, who has been in this courtroom from the very beginning of this case.
This is unbelievable.
Kayla.
Yeah, Daryl briefly touched on it, that it was shocking to him that, of course, official misconduct as well as official oppression, they were also found not guilty of those 2 charges. And one of those simply had to do with stepping in and refraining from giving any help to Tyre after it was clear that he was beaten. Now, we know at this point that one of the witnesses that the defense called was EMT Robert Long. He was on scene that night. He was called to the scene and was initially told that Tyre had been pepper sprayed and tased and was able to get away from officers. But he admitted that he was waiting for the person that was his superior on the scene, the advanced EMT, to step up and tell him what to do. But he also admitted that he witnessed Tyre's condition deteriorate the longer they were out on the scene. And I think the timing that they gave us was about 19 minutes from the time that he initially got to the scene and was told to respond to Nichols, from the time that Nichols was actually put into an ambulance and taken to St. Francis Hospital. Now, of course, in case you missed that verdict, we do have a piece of that here for you to watch live. Take a listen.
Count 1, second-degree murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Tadarius Bean, not guilty. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Demetrius Haley, not guilty. Count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, Justice Smith, not guilty.
And of course, that count 1 that he referenced there is for that 2nd-degree murder charge. And per Tennessee law, if you do not think that something fits the bill for 2nd-degree murder, you're allowed to consider about 9 lesser charges. Now, in this case, those lesser charges included voluntary manslaughter, as well as reckless homicide and criminally negligent homicide. You could also consider aggravated assault resulting in death and aggravated assault resulting in injury. And in this case, the jury felt that that was not something that was fit. Now, we also know the fact that the defendants were in court as this was read. Now, of course, their back was facing where I was sitting, so I couldn't see their faces and their reactions initially, but you could see that their attorneys were standing right next to them, and there was a deep sigh of relief coming from them, as well as their attorneys, as well as their families. And as I mentioned before, we heard the families of these defendants as soon as they left the courtroom. They were saying, "Thank you, Jesus," and they were embracing, and they were very happy that their family members were acquitted. But again, they're not completely off the hook. They still do have to face the federal charges that they were all found guilty of. We know Demetrius Haley was found guilty of obstruction of justice as well as Bean and Smith, but Haley was also found guilty of excessive force resulting in bodily injury from the kick that he administered. That was one of the main focal points that we saw in the federal trial as well as in this trial. But his attorneys were able to tell the jury multiple times that that kick was not to the head of Tyre Nichols, that in fact it was to his body. And the reason they gave was that Haley decided to kick in order to make Nichols give his arm to Smith and Bean so that he could properly be handcuffed. And of course, that testimony resonated with the jury.
Kayla, I know you've been in the courtroom again from the very beginning, and we were talking earlier that that was one of the main points by the defense attorneys. They continue to stress the impact of Emmett Martin, of course, Desmond Mills, that it was their kicks, their punches. That is what really led to the death of Tyre Nichols. And the three other officers were simply just trying to contain Nichols in a sense.
Yeah, and during his closing arguments yesterday, Stephen Loeffler, one of the attorneys for Demetrius Haley, actually was effective. He gave timestamps of how at the initial traffic stop when Haley was there, he had just been sprayed with pepper spray in his eyes, and he was still at the scene of that initial traffic stop when Martin, Bean, and Smith were trying to get Nichols into handcuffs. He went through timestamp by timestamp saying that it was at this time that Martin administered a kick, that he administered a punch, that he administered another kick. And this all happened before Haley even got to the scene. But then there was also video shown from the Sky Cop that shows that the second Haley did get to the scene, he made a comment that had an expletive in it. And when he hopped out the car, he did kick Nichols, according to his defense attorneys, in the arm to try to make sure that he could be put into handcuffs. But again, that seemed to resonate with the jury.
You know, Kayla, Steve Mulroy isn't one to show emotion, but he seemed visibly disturbed by this decision.
Yeah, and you can see it in the courtroom, actually. As soon as the verdict was read, I did have a direct line of sight to DA Mulroy, and you could see that the emotion had flushed from his face after we got about halfway through the verdict being read. And of course, it took a while for that full verdict because we're talking 21 charges total, 7 charges per defendant, so that's 21 charges. It took a while for all of it to be read, and you could see Mulroy's face lose emotion as it was being read completely by Judge Jones.
Let's replay right now.
We are obviously disappointed by today's verdict.
This is insane.
We respect the jury's decision, but we obviously strongly disagree with it. We, in good faith, brought this case, and I am convinced to this day that we had compelling evidence that showed that there was proof for every element of every one of the offenses that we charged. The jury took a different view. That is, of course, their right. That's the part of the decision.
Yeah, you heard it there, but you also did hear, we heard from Deputy District Attorney Paul Hagerman, who was the lead prosecutor on this case. He talked about where that jury came from and why Hamilton County in particular was chosen. Don't know how much of it you heard. But the explanation that he gave was that it's one of the counties in Tennessee that received the least amount of publicity when it came to the Tyre Nichols case. And that ultimately is where they decided to choose the jury from, of course, after the judge gave them the go-ahead to get that outside jury to come here to Shelby County.
Kayla, I do have a question for you that's always very interesting. We know every court case, someone wins and someone always loses. But before that verdict was read, was there a feeling inside the courtroom on which way this case was going to go?
Now, just for perspective, when that federal case happened, it took about 3 weeks. We had a verdict in a matter of 5.5 hours. It took less than 6 hours. They went to deliberate by 10, and by about 4:30, we knew that there was a verdict that had been reached. And in a situation like that, you don't really know what to expect when a verdict is reached that quickly. Now, in this case, of course, they began deliberating just after 12:30 yesterday. And the longer time goes on, the more you start to think of what the possible outcomes can be. So again, it took about 8 hours in total between yesterday and today for deliberations. It's fair to say that none of us really knew how this was going. We knew that the lesser charges were in play. We also knew that there were 7 charges that these men faced at this level, and on the federal level, it was 4 charges each. So we didn't really know what was going on. And saw the family a couple times, the family of Tyre Nichols. They were pacing in the hallway throughout the day. They just kept saying that they didn't want to sit still. They were getting antsy. So that kind of was the feeling that really all of us had as we were waiting to get the final signal that there was a verdict today.
And anxious for everyone waiting to hear what happens. That is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon reporting. Something that came from District Attorney Steve Mulroy. He said that they are disappointed in this verdict of not guilty for all of these officers, the 3 officers involved. But at this point, we have to respect the jury.
Yeah,
All right, so we're gonna stop it there. You guys can continue to watch that. It's all over the place. Okay, we just really wanted to watch the guilty verdict. That's just the behind the scenes of what everybody's feeling and thinking after that. As you guys heard, they still have to go through the federal charges, which I really hope they get them on that, because it's a little bit more precise in terms of what happened at the actual scene where the officers were seen assaulting Tyre Nichols, which ultimately caused him to lose his life. So I'm hoping that justice is received on that end, since they didn't get it on this end. I'm very disappointed. I keep asking too, who are these jurors? Like, you guys need to also look into seeing if they're Republicans. Okay, nothing against nobody that's Republican, but we guys, for those of you that know, when Trump took office, he definitely said that any officers that are brought up on charges, that he would make sure that they would not be prosecuted. Now, my thing is this: when somebody go as far as these officers did to make someone lose their life, I don't give a damn if you're an officer or a sergeant, whatever it is. If you are not protecting and serving, and I don't see where they protected and served anywhere in this particular case with Tyre Nichols, I feel like it was excessive force, and I feel like they do need to be reprimanded for that. And I do feel like some charges definitely need to be brought up, and they need to be found guilty. Period. It's gonna cause a riot and other people acting crazy behind this. I just know it. I saw somebody put it in the chat earlier where you guys said that it reminded you of what's the boy name? Let me go back. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on. Rodney King. It does remind you of Rodney King, where the officers assaulted him and he wound up, he didn't pass away from that. He actually died from drowning in his pool, but still there was no justice served for him. So my thing is, it was an all-white jury, and we definitely need to look into that, because if they slowed the video down to where you could actually see the assault on Tyre Nichols, why are you still saying not guilty? Like, the evidence is right there in your face. Okay, so maybe their mental was that, hey, it's just one more black child or black person off the street. They don't care. I mean, I would have liked for it to have been, if it was 7 jurors, at least have 4 black, 3 white, so that it could seem fair. Okay, somebody that has, a little bit more connection to what a person in that particular race would feel in this particular case. I don't understand how they came up with a not guilty verdict on all charges and all counts for these 3 police officers. Okay, and the other 2, they play it out. So I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how this is going to happen or how it's going to go. But in terms of the federal case and the federal charges and how that turns out, I will definitely spin the block, and we will talk about that as well. And I will go live so that you guys can see the outcome of that particular charges for those officers as well. There's really nowhere these officers can go where they can be safe. But I said it in the chat, as all officers they find themselves in situations like this, do I think that they're going to jump and go to another precinct so that they can go and do the same thing? Absolutely. Most officers who find themselves in situations like this probably were in situations growing up where they were bullied. So now that they have a badge and a weapon in order to flex their power, so to speak, versus protecting and serve, which is what they were hired to do, and you took an oath to do so, I feel like it's a means of power. It's a power trip. It's bullying. Okay, you're using your badge to bully others. I feel like excessive force was definitely used here. Okay, I do. I mean, how hard is it for you and another officer to make another person put their hand behind their back so that you can put cuffs on them? Like, how many officers did it take? I counted 5 on the scene. Maybe it might have been more from what I could see. Obviously, this guy was not a threat after you maced him. Of course, you know, when you mace a person, they're discombobulated a bit because of the mace burning their eyes. So that's the perfect opportunity for you to then grab them and put their hands behind their back and quickly cuff them. That's what you guys are trained to do. You go through very rigorous training in order to be a police officer. So it's definitely no excuse for this situation to have gone as far as it did when this young man lost his life. I saw the pictures of Tyre Nichols in the hospital, where he definitely was banged up really bad behind these officers, kicking, hitting, punching, pushing, and everything else. There's no reason for you to stomp on his arm, kick him in the, like, why? I don't get it. But hopefully justice will be served in the federal charges that are against these officers. And again, I will keep you guys updated on anything else as related with this case. Okay. Thank y'all so much for joining. Please don't forget to hit the like button on this. Let me get back to, let's stop sharing. I already knew this was going to make me mad just covering it, but I knew that we talked about this and I wanted to share that with you guys as well. Let me get my banner down. Again, thank you guys for joining. Belle Wilson, KBR, Tyra, Scorpion, Miss, Rose Armstead, and True TV Podcast. Thank you guys for modding, and thank you for all the content creators that came over. Of course, everyone in the bushes and also in the chat as well. Thank y'all for coming over and watching with us. Okay, please don't forget to hit the like to support the video and push it out into the algorithm. All right, love you guys down. See you guys on the next one. All right. Bye.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.